Welcome to Storytales. Please like this video and subscribe to Storytales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The July sun beat down on Wes Callahan's meticulously maintained backyard as he adjusted the temperature on the grill. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead, less from the Texas heat and more from the tension knotting his shoulders. Something fell off today. He couldn't place it, but years of managing construction projects had taught him to trust his instincts when things didn't add up. Need another beer, honey? Aubrey's voice cut through his thoughts. Wes turned to look at his wife of 7 years. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a neat ponytail, her sundress perfectly pressed. Always put together, always flawless. Too flawless, maybe. I'm good, he replied, turning his attention back to the steaks sizzling on the grill. Guests should be here soon. Aubrey lingered a moment too long, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Your parents called. They'll be here in 10 minutes. Silas is coming with them. At the mention of his younger brother, Wes's jaw tightened. Great. The relationship between the brothers had always been strained. Where Wes was methodical and responsible, Silas was impulsive and charming. Their parents had always made excuses for Silas's failures while expecting nothing short of perfection from Wes. The doorbell rang, interrupting his thoughts. I'll get it, Aubrey said, already walking away, a strange excitement in her step that Wes couldn't help but notice. Voices drifted from inside the house as parents' familiar tones, followed by Silas's booming laugh. Wes took a deep breath and arranged his face into a neutral expression before turning to greet them. There he is. Frank Callahan, a broad-shouldered man in his 60s, stepped onto the patio. The man of the hour. Hi, Dad, Wes said, accepting a brief handshake. Margot Callahan followed, her silver hair styled perfectly despite the humidity. She offered Wes a quick peck on the cheek. The yard looks lovely, Wesley, though those hedges could use a trim. Before Wes could respond, Silas emerged, a beer already in hand. At 32, he was 3 years younger than Wes, but carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd never faced consequences for his actions. Big brother. Silas grinned, raising his beer in greeting. Nice spread you got here. Business must be booming. It's doing well, Wes answered evenly, noticing how Silas's eyes darted to Aubrey, who stood closer to his brother than necessary. A flicker of something passed between them so quick that if Wes hadn't been watching carefully, he would have missed it. More guests arrived. A few neighbors, colleagues from Wes's construction firm, and some mutual friends. The backyard filled with conversation and laughter as Wes served up the steaks and burgers. Throughout the meal, he couldn't shake the sensation that he was outside looking in on his own gathering. His parents praised Silas's latest business venture, an auto repair shop that had opened last year, while barely acknowledging Wes's recent promotion. Silas just needs a bit more capital, Frank was saying. Then the shop will really take off. Maybe your big brother can help you out, Margot suggested, glancing at Wes. He's always been good with money. I'm doing just fine, Silas replied with a strange smirk. Got all figured out. Wes caught Aubrey and Silas exchanging another look. His stomach tightened as the evening progressed. Wes noticed Aubrey checking her watch repeatedly. Just as dessert was being served, she stood up and clinked her glass with a spoon. The chatter died down as all eyes turned to her. Everyone, I have an announcement to make, Aubrey said, her voice steady. She looked around the table, her gaze lingering on Margot and Frank before landing on Silas. I'm pregnant. A moment of silence, then a chorus of congratulations erupted. Wes felt a momentary surge of pride and joy until he saw the expression on Aubrey's face. It wasn't the look of a woman sharing happy news with her husband. It was the look of someone about to drop a bomb. But, she continued, her voice cutting through the noise, it's not Wes's child. The backyard went deadly quiet. Wes felt every eye turn to him. It's Silas's, Aubrey announced, a smug expression settling on her face. And we've decided that I should move into this house with him. Tom seemed to slow down. Wes gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. The betrayal wasn't just from Aubrey, it was from his own brother. The person who should have had his back. Wes looked at his parents, expecting shock, outrage on his behalf. Instead, he saw something far worse, acceptance. We support their decision, Margot said, reaching across to pat Aubrey's hand. It's for the best. Frank nodded in agreement. Sometimes these things happen, son. You'll bounce back. Silas leaned back in his chair, a triumphant smirk on his face. He clearly expected Wes to explode, to give him all the satisfaction of seeing him fall apart. Instead, Wes lifted his glass of whiskey, took a slow, deliberate sip, and set it down carefully. The ice clinked against the glass in the silence. That's funny, he said, his voice calm and controlled, because I sold the house last week. The smirk vanished from Silas's face. You what? Aubrey's smug expression crumbled. That's not possible. Sign the papers on Monday, Wes said, meeting each of their shocked gazes in turn. New owners move in next month. You can't do that, Aubrey sputtered. My name is on the deed too. Check the paperwork, Wes replied. Remember when you were too busy to go to the attorney's office last year and sign those documents I brought home? You transferred your interest in the property to me. Legally, it's been mine alone to sell. He turned to Silas. You plan to humiliate me in my own home. Too bad it's not mine anymore. Silas half rose from his chair, fists clenched. You're lying. The truth hurts, doesn't it? Wes stood up, his composure intact despite the chaos erupting around him. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live, Aubrey. I suggest you start packing. Wesley. Margot's voice was sharp. You need to be reasonable about this. Wes turned to his mother. Reasonable? Like supporting your younger son's affair with your older son's wife? Like planning this ambush at my dinner table? We just want everyone to be happy, Frank said weakly. And clearly, everyone doesn't include me. Wes looked around the table at his so-called family, at the shocked faces of friends who'd been unwitting witnesses to his humiliation. Enjoy the rest of your evening. I'm done here. He walked away, ignoring Aubrey's calls and Silas's threats. As he reached the side gate, he heard the chaos erupting behind him, Aubrey's hysterical questions about whether he was telling the truth, Silas demanding answers, his parents trying to calm everyone down. None of it was his problem anymore. The slam of his car door cut off the noise from the house. Wes sat in the driver's seat, hands gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. His breathing came in short, controlled bursts as he fought to maintain his composure. Through the rearview mirror, he watched as guests began to leave, hurrying to their cars with embarrassed glances back at the house. No one approached his vehicle. No one came to check if he was okay. For 15 minutes, Wes sat motionless, processing what had just happened. His wife and brother, his own parents knowing, approving, the careful planning that must have gone into tonight's ambush. They thought they had it all figured out, he muttered, starting the engine. They thought I was the fool. He drove aimlessly, avoiding the routes toward his usual haunts. He didn't want to be found, didn't want to see anyone who had witnessed his humiliation. As he drove, fragments of memories flashed through his mind. Aubrey's recent late nights at work, Silas showing up unannounced at their house when Wes was away, his parents' strange comments about family staying together no matter what. The signs had been there. He'd been too trusting, too focused on building their life to see what was happening right under his nose. 2 hours later, Wes pulled into the parking lot of a motel on the outskirts of town. He'd already packed a suitcase last week after signing the house papers, intuition telling him something was off. The bag sat in the trunk of his car, containing everything he needed for the next few weeks. Inside room 118, Wes sat on the edge of the bed, tie loosened, shirt unbuttoned at the collar. His phone lit up with notifications, missed calls from Aubrey, text messages from Silas, voicemails from his parents. He ignored them all. Instead, he opened his laptop and logged into his bank accounts. As expected, Aubrey had already attempted to access their joint account. Too late. 3 days ago, he transferred most of the funds to a new account in his name only, leaving just enough in the joint account to avoid suspicion until tonight. He'd known something was wrong. Maybe not the full extent of the betrayal, but enough to take precautions. Another notification, an email from his attorney confirming that the house sale documents were proceeding as planned. The truth he'd thrown in their faces wasn't a bluff. The house was sold, the paperwork legitimate. In 30 days, neither Aubrey nor Silas would have any claim to it. His phone rang again, Aubrey. On the 10th ring, he answered but said nothing. Is it true? Her voice was shrill, panicked. Did you really sell the house? Yes. You can't do this. Where am I supposed to go? I'm pregnant. Wes's laugh was hollow. Not my problem. Take it up with the father. Wes, please. You have 30 days. I suggest you start looking for somewhere else to live. But he hung up, then shut off his phone completely. Sleep wouldn't come tonight. He knew that much. But sitting in this room, alone with his thoughts, wasn't an option either. The rage building inside him needed an outlet. Wes grabbed his car keys and headed back out. The night was still young, and he had plans to make a 24-hour diner 40 miles from home. Wes sat in a corner booth with a cup of black coffee and a legal pad. No one here knew him. No one would interrupt as the hours ticked by. He mapped out his next steps. This wasn't just about survival now. This was about making sure that those who had betrayed him paid the price. All of them, by dawn, he had a plan. It wouldn't be quick. It wouldn't be easy. But it would be thorough. They thought they could take everything from him. They were about to learn how wrong they were. 3 days after the dinner party, Wes moved into a furnished apartment downtown. The monthly rent was steep, but the building required a background check and had excellent security, important considerations now that he knew what his family was capable of. He'd taken a week off work, citing a family emergency. Not entirely a lie. His assistant had sounded concerned on the phone, but Wes had kept the details vague. The last thing he needed was workplace gossip. Sitting at the kitchen counter with his laptop open, Wes began his investigation. First step, understanding the full scope of the betrayal. The knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Through the peephole, he saw Mike Donovan, one of his few genuine friends from the neighborhood. Wes hesitated, then opened the door. Man, I've been trying to reach you for days, Mike said, concern etched on his face. You okay? Wes stepped aside to let him in. As okay as can be expected. Mike entered, taking in the sparse apartment. Nice place. Temporary. For now. Wes closed the door. How did you find me? Called your office. Your assistant mentioned you'd filed a change of address. Mike rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. Look, I'm sorry about what happened at the barbecue. I don't even have words. Wes gestured toward the kitchen. Coffee, sure. As Wes prepared 2 cups, Mike sat at the counter. Everyone's talking about it, you know. Aubrey's version is that you knew about her and Silas for months and were okay with it until she got pregnant. The mug in Wes's hand cracked under his grip. He set it down carefully in the sink. And people believe that. Some do. Others think it's bull. The Richardsons were at the party. They said your face when she made the announcement was the face of a man blindsided. I was. Wes handed Mike a fresh mug of coffee. What else are people saying? Mike hesitated. You sure you want to know? I need to. Word is the affair's been going on for over a year. Your neighbor, Mrs. Castillo, mentioned seeing Silas's truck parked outside your house at odd hours when you were out of town. A year. The timeline hit Wes like a physical punch. Last summer, he'd been managing a construction project in Austin, coming home only on weekends. Aubrey had seemed distant, but he'd attributed it to his absence. Now it made sense. Who else knew? Wes asked, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. Mike shifted uncomfortably. I didn't want to believe it, but apparently quite a few people suspected something. Aubrey and Silas weren't exactly discreet. They were spotted at Riverdale restaurant a few times, looking cozy. Riverdale was an upscale place 30 minutes away. Wes and Aubrey had celebrated their anniversary there just 6 months ago. Had the staff recognized her from her dates with Silas? The thought made his stomach turn. Your parents never said anything. Mike asked that Wes's laugh was bitter. They knew. They approved. Jesus. Mike shook his head. That's messed up. Tell me about it. Wes took a sip of his coffee. I need a favor. Name it. Keep your ear to the ground. Let me know what else you hear. But don't tell anyone you've seen me or where I'm staying. Mike nodded. Consider it done. And Wes, for what it's worth, most of us are on your side. What they did, there's no excuse for that. After Mike left, Wes returned to his laptop. With renewed determination, he began digging deeper. First, he checked their phone records. The evidence was there in black and white. Hundreds of calls and text messages between Aubrey and Silas over the past 14 months. Some late at night, others during business hours when Aubrey was supposedly at work. Next, He reviewed their credit card statements. Charges from hotels, restaurants, even a weekend getaway to a bed and breakfast 3 months ago when Aubrey had told him she was visiting her college roommate. The betrayal had been thorough, calculated, and ongoing. Not a momentary lapse, not a one-time mistake, but a sustained campaign of deception. Wes moved on to their financial accounts, and what he found made his blood run cold. Over the past year, Aubrey had transferred money from their joint savings to an account he didn't recognize. Small amounts at first, $500 here, $1,000 there, growing larger in recent months. The total was staggering. $82,500 that a quick search revealed the destination account belonged to Callahan Auto Repair LLC, Silas's business. His wife hadn't just betrayed him emotionally. She'd been systematically draining their accounts to fund his brother's failing business. Wes sat back, the full picture becoming clear. They hadn't just been having an affair. They'd been stealing from him, planning their future together, all while smiling to his face. His phone rang a number he didn't recognize. Against his better judgment, he answered. "Hello, Wes. It's Jessica from the bank, the mortgage specialist he'd worked with for years. I'm calling because your wife was here earlier trying to stop a house sale. She seemed to think you forged her signature on the transfer of ownership last year." Wes closed his eyes. Well, we have the notarized documents on file. Her ID was verified at signing. I just wanted to let you know she was making accusations. I appreciate the call, Jessica. One more thing, she also tried to access your personal accounts, claiming they should be joint assets. I informed her that wasn't possible without your authorization. After thanking Jessica and ending the call, Wes stared at the wall. Aubrey was getting desperate. Good. His investigation continued into the night. By morning, he had compiled a comprehensive record of the affair, the financial theft, and the planned ambush. Every text, every transaction, every lie, all documented. Knowledge was power, and now he knew exactly what he was dealing with. The next day, Wes received another unexpected visitor. When he opened the door, Silas stood there, attempting to look confident but clearly uncomfortable. "We need to talk," Silas said. "No, we don't." Wes moved to close the door, but Silas stuck his foot in the way. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Wes considered his options. Hearing what Silas had to say might provide additional information. He stepped back, allowing his brother to enter. Silas looked around the apartment, clearly surprised by its quality. "Nice place." "For minutes left," Wes replied. Arms crossed, Silas sighed. "Look, this got out of hand. It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "How is it supposed to happen? You sleep with my wife, get her pregnant, and I just hand over my house and walk away smiling. You don't understand. Aubrey and we connected. It just happened. For 14 months. Wes raised an eyebrow. "Try again." Silas paled. I know everything. The hotel stays, the weekend trips, the money she transferred to your business. Wes stepped closer. "How's the auto shop doing, by the way? Still losing money every month?" "That's not. 3 years of business school, and you still can't turn a profit. Maybe you should have paid more attention in class instead of partying." Silas's face flushed with anger. "Not everyone can be perfect like you." "Perfect?" Wes laughed. "Is that what you think? I worked for everything I have. No one handed me anything. Meanwhile, you took from our parents, from me, and now you've taken my wife." "She wasn't happy with you," Silas shot back. "She came to me. And the money? Did that come to you too? $82,500 from our savings account to your business. That's not an affair, Silas. That's theft." Silas's confidence faltered. She insisted. "Said you wouldn't miss it with how much you were making. Get out. Wes, be reasonable. Get out." Wes's voice was deadly quiet. "And tell Aubrey that if one more dollar disappears from any of my accounts, I'm going to the police with evidence of fraud." After Silas left, Wes made 2 phone calls. The first was to a private investigator he'd worked with on a construction project security issue last year. The second was to his attorney. By sundown, he had set his plan in motion. The private investigator would document any further attempts by Aubrey or Silas to access his accounts or spread lies about him. The attorney was preparing cease and desist letters regarding the financial theft. But these were just the opening moves. The real strategy would take time to unfold. That evening, Wes received a call from his father. "Son, we need to talk about this reasonably," Frank began, his tone placating. "Like you did when you supported my brother's affair with my wife." Wes replied coldly, "That's not fair. We didn't support the affair. We just accepted the situation once it happened." "When did you find out?" A pause. "What does it matter now?" "When, Dad?" Frank sighed. "About 6 months ago. Silas came to us, said he was in love with Aubrey. We told him to end it, but he wouldn't listen. So instead of telling me, you decided to help them plan how to take my house." "No, that wasn't the plan. They were going to tell you privately, but then Aubrey found out she was pregnant, and things accelerated." "Save it." Wes cut him off. "I'm not interested in your version of events. You made your choice. You chose Silas, like you always have." "That's not true, Wesley. We love you both equally." The lie was so blatant that Wes almost laughed. "Goodbye, Dad." He hung up and blocked his father's number, then his mother's, then Silas's. One by one, he cut the connections to those who had betrayed him. Alone in his apartment, Wes opened a bottle of whiskey and poured himself 2 fingers. He raised the glass in a mock toast. "To family," he said to the empty room, "and to justice." The real work would begin tomorrow. Silas's business, Aubrey's reputation, his parents' smug complacency. All of it would crumble. They thought they could take everything from him. Now he would show them exactly what he was capable of. 2 weeks after the disastrous family barbecue, Wes sat in his office at Heartland Construction, reviewing project timelines. He'd thrown himself into work, arriving before dawn and leaving well after dark. His colleagues had noticed the change, but knew better than to ask questions. The dark circles under his eyes and the rigid set of his jaw told them all they needed to know. His assistant, Rachel, knocked on his open door. "Mr. Callahan, your 10 o'clock is here." Wes glanced at his watch. "Send him in." Tom Grayson entered, hat in hand. As the owner of Grayson's Hardware, he supplied materials for many of Wes's projects. More importantly, his store was the hub of local gossip. "Thanks for making time, Wes," Tom said, settling into the chair across from him. "Wasn't sure you'd want to see anyone these days." "Business continues," Wes replied simply. "What can I help you with?" Tom shifted uncomfortably. "Actually, I came to see how you're holding up. News travels fast in this town." "I'm aware." Wes leaned back in his chair. "What exactly have you heard?" "That Aubrey and your brother." Tom trailed off, then cleared his throat. "Well, that they're expecting a baby together. That they tried to take your house." Wes nodded, expression neutral. "And what's your take on that?" "My take?" Tom's eyebrows shot up. "It's downright shameful what they did. And your parents taking their side? The whole town's talking about it." "Are they?" Wes's voice remained even, but his interest was piqued. "What else are they saying?" Tom hesitated. "Some folks are wondering how Silas's shop stays open when no one ever seems to be there. Joyce Miller took her car in last month, and he kept it for 2 weeks for a simple brake job." Wes made a non-committal noise. "Interesting. And Bill Johnson over at the credit union mentioned." Tom stopped abruptly. "Well, I shouldn't repeat bank talk." "Please," Wes gestured for him to continue. "I'd appreciate knowing what people are saying." "Bill said Silas has been late on his business loan payments 3 months running. Said if it weren't for your parents vouching for him, they'd have called the loan already." This was the opening Wes had been waiting for. "Tom, would you say people trust Silas?" "They used to. He's got that charm," Tom replied. "But lately, there's been talk. Overcharging, missed deadlines, parts ordered but never installed." Wes leaned forward. "What if I told you he's been funding that shop with money taken from my accounts, without my knowledge or consent?" Tom's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" $82,500 over the past year. "My wife." Wes paused, correcting himself. "Aubrey transferred it in small amounts, hoping I wouldn't notice." "That's not just wrong, Wes. That's illegal." "It is," Wes agreed, "and I have all the documentation to prove it." By the time Tom left an hour later, Wes knew the information would spread across town before sundown. He wasn't normally one to air dirty laundry, but this wasn't about gossip. This was about truth. 3 days later, Wes walked into Eastern Texas Bank and asked for the branch manager, Harold Wilson. "Wes." Harold greeted him warmly. Good to see you. Come on back to my office. Once seated, Wes got straight to the point. I need to discuss some concerning financial activity. Harold. He laid out the evidence. Bank statements showing transfers from his joint account with Aubrey to Silas's business account, copies of checks with Aubrey's forged signature, and records of cash withdrawals that coincided with deposits to Silas's account. That Harold's expression grew increasingly grave. This is serious, Wes. Very serious. I know. That's why I'm here officially, not just as a friend, Wes replied. I've already filed a police report. The detective suggested I alert the bank directly. You filed charges against your wife and brother. Harold couldn't hide his surprise. Ex-wife, soon enough, Wes corrected. And yes, theft is theft, regardless of who commits it. Harold nodded slowly. We'll need to freeze the account in question pending investigation. And I should warn you, Silas took out a business loan with us last year. Your wife co-signed. Aubrey co-signed. Wes hadn't known this detail. She had no authority to do that. Our prenuptial agreement specifically prohibits taking on debt for third parties without mutual consent. I wasn't aware, Harold frowned. She presented herself as having full authority. Another fraud to add to the list, Wes said grimly. How much was the loan? $120,000. Wes whistled softly. And the current balance? Harold checked his computer. Still $115 outstanding. There have been payment issues. I imagine there will be more now, Wes replied, especially once you flag the business account for fraudulent deposits. By the time Wes left the bank, the wheels were in motion. Harold would alert the fraud department, which would trigger an investigation into Silas's business finances. The loan would be called the account frozen. The first domino had fallen. That evening, Wes received a call from Mike Donovan. Man, you won't believe what's happening, Mike said without preamble. Silas's shop is emptying out. I drove by this afternoon, and people were literally taking their cars out of the service bays unfinished. Word travels fast, Wes remarked. It's not just word of mouth. Someone posted a warning on the town Facebook page about fraudulent charges at Callahan Auto Repair. Then 3 people commented with their own stories about being overcharged. It's a mess. Reputation is everything in a small business, Wes said. Hard to build, easy to lose. This feels like more than coincidence, Wes. Did you have something to do with this? I simply told the truth, Mike. Nothing more. The next morning, Wes arrived at work to find Silas waiting in the parking lot, face flushed with anger. You son of a bitch, Silas shouted, storming toward him as Wes got out of his car. What the hell did you do? Wes remained calm, noting that several co-workers had stopped to watch. Be specific, Silas. What exactly are you accusing me of? My business account is frozen. The bank called my loan. Clients are canceling left and right. Silas's voice cracked with desperation. You're ruining me. No, Silas. You ruined yourself, Wes replied evenly. When you stole from me. When you slept with my wife. When you planned to take my house. These are just consequences. Silas lunged forward, grabbing Wes by the shirt collar. You think you're so perfect, so much better than me. You've always thought that. Wes didn't flinch. Remove your hands, or the next call I make will be to the police. Assault charges won't help your situation. You already called the cops on me. Silas spat, but he released his grip. Your own brother. You stopped being my brother the moment you betrayed me. Wes straightened his collar. And yes, I reported the theft. $82,500 is grand theft by any definition. That money was going to help us start over. Silas protested. Aubrey said you owed us after how you treated her. Wes laughed, a cold sound without humor. How I treated her? I gave her everything. A beautiful home, financial security, my trust. He shook his head, none of which she deserved, apparently. You were never there, always working, always too busy for her. So that justifies theft? That makes betrayal acceptable. Wes stepped closer. Let me make something very clear, Silas. This is just the beginning. By the time I'm done, you'll have nothing. No business, no reputation, no future in this town. Silas's face paled. You can't do this. Watch me. Wes turned toward the office building. Now get off company property before I have security remove you. Wes, please. Silas's tone changed, desperation replacing anger. I need help. The bank wants their money. I don't have it. That sounds like a personal problem, Wes called over his shoulder. Maybe ask our parents. They've always been eager to bail you out. As Wes walked away, he heard Silas shout, "This isn't over." But they both knew it was. Silas had lost a week past. Wes had moved methodically through his plan, documenting every fraudulent transaction, every betrayal, every lie. The divorce papers had been filed, citing adultery and financial misconduct. His attorney had assured him the case was solid, especially with the evidence of fund misappropriation. But on Saturday morning, Wes was reviewing contractor bids for a new project when his doorbell rang. He wasn't expecting anyone, and few people knew his new address. Through the peephole, he saw Aubrey. Her normally perfectly styled hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her makeup couldn't quite hide the dark circles under her eyes. Wes considered ignoring her, but decided against it. Better to face this now that he opened the door, but blocked the entrance. "What do you want?" Aubrey flinched at his tone. "Can I come in? Please? We need to talk. We have nothing to talk about. My attorney will handle all communication going forward." "Wes, please." She placed a hand on her slightly rounded stomach. "Think about the situation. I'm pregnant with my brother's child." Wes reminded her coldly. "How is that my concern?" "I made a mistake," she said, her voice cracking. "A terrible mistake. I see that now." Wes crossed his arms. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or burning dinner. What you did was a calculated betrayal that went on for over a year. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. I know, and I'm sorry." Tears welled in her eyes. "But I'm desperate, Wes. Silas is falling apart. The business is ruined. We have nowhere to go when the house sale closes next week. Again, how is any of that my problem? Because you caused it," she snapped, her victim act momentarily slipping. "You could have just walked away, but instead, you had to destroy everything." Wes laughed. "That's rich coming from you. You and Silas planned to humiliate me in front of our friends and family. You stole from me for months. You betrayed every vow we made. And now you're angry that I didn't just roll over and take it. I never meant to hurt you," she insisted, the tears flowing freely now. "Things just happened with Silas. We connected in a way that—" "Save it." Wes cut her off. "I'm not interested in the details of your affair." "Fine." She wiped at her tears. "But what about the money? We need something to live on, at least until the baby comes. You can't just cut me off completely." "Actually, I can. The prenup you signed has an infidelity clause. You get nothing." Wes's voice remained steady. "As for the money you already took, the bank is investigating those transactions as fraud. You might want to hire a good criminal attorney." Aubrey's face went pale. "You wouldn't." "I already have." "Wes, be reasonable." She gripped the door frame, her knuckles white. "I'm going to be a mother. Your brother's child will be your niece or nephew. You should have thought of that before you betrayed me." Wes stepped back. "You made your choice, Aubrey. Enjoy it." "Wait," she cried as he began to close the door. "What about the furniture? The wedding china? My grandmother's jewelry? I need to get my things from the house. You have until Tuesday. After that, the new owners take possession, and anything left behind becomes their property." Wes paused. "And Aubrey? The jewelry was purchased with my money. Check the prenup. It stays with me." He shut the door on her protests, cutting off her voice mid-sentence. Through the door, he heard her sob, then a thump as she pounded on the wood. "You can't do this." "Wes, open the door. We need to talk about this." Wes walked to his kitchen, poured himself a cup of coffee, and listened as her pleas grew more desperate, then gradually subsided. After 15 minutes, he heard her car start and drive away. He pulled out his phone and called his attorney. "Richard, it's Wes Callahan. Aubrey just showed up at my apartment." "Yes, I don't know how she got the address either." "No, I didn't let her in. She's making demands about property division and support." "Right, the prenup covers all that. One more thing, can we expedite the timeline on the divorce filing? I want this wrapped up as quickly as possible." After ending the call, Wes opened his laptop and checked his email. There was a message from the private investigator he'd hired, with photo attachments showing Silas removing equipment from his shop in the middle of the night. "Asset liquidation. Wes murmured. Desperate times. He forwarded the email to Richard with a note. Evidence of possible intent to flee or hide assets. Can we get a court order to prevent this? The response came quickly. On it, Wes sat back, sipping his coffee. Every move Aubrey and Silas made now only dug them deeper into the hole they'd created. All he had to do was watch and document. Their downfall was proceeding exactly as planned. The following week brought a fresh wave of consequences. The court had issued a temporary restraining order preventing Silas from removing or selling business assets, pending investigation of the fraud allegations. Aubrey had been served with divorce papers at her mother's house, where she'd apparently been staying since the confrontation at Wes's apartment. But one piece of unfinished business remained. His parents, Frank and Margot Callahan, had raised him, but their preference for Silas had been a constant throughout his life. Wes had spent years trying to earn their approval, only to be betrayed in the most fundamental way. They hadn't just failed to warn him about the affair, they had actively supported it. On Sunday afternoon, Wes drove to his parents' house, a sprawling ranch-style home in one of the older, more established neighborhoods. The lawn was immaculately maintained, the flower beds precisely edged, all paid for by the monthly allowance Wes had been providing for the past 3 years, ever since his father's retirement fund had been depleted, bailing Silas out of yet another failed business venture. He parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, gathering his thoughts. This conversation wouldn't be easy, but it was necessary. His mother answered the door, surprise evident on her face. Wesley, I didn't expect to see you. We need to talk, Wes said, stepping past her into the foyer. Is Dad home? In his study. Margot wrung her hands nervously. Can I get you something to drink? Coffee? Tea? This isn't a social call, Mom. Get Dad and meet me in the living room. Wes settled into an armchair, noting the new furniture since his last visit. The monthly checks he sent were clearly being put to use, if not wisely. Frank entered, followed by Margot. His father's expression was guarded, but he extended a hand. Son, good to see you. Wes ignored the outstretched hand. Sit down, both of you. Frank's hand dropped, and he exchanged a glance with Margot before they sat together on the sofa across from him. If this is about Silas and Aubrey, Frank began, we want you to know we never intended. I didn't come here for excuses. Wes interrupted. I came for answers. When exactly did you find out about their affair? Margot sighed. Does it matter now? What's done is done. It matters to me, Wes replied. When? Frank looked uncomfortable. About 8 months ago, Silas came to us, said he had feelings for Aubrey. And your response was what? Go for it, son. Betray your brother? No, Margot protested. We told him to end it. We did, Wesley. But you didn't tell me, Wes pointed out. You didn't warn me that my wife and brother were sneaking around behind my back. We hoped it would burn itself out, Frank explained. We didn't want to hurt you if it was just a phase. A phase, Wes repeated incredulously. They were sleeping together for over a year. They stole money from me. They planned to take my house. And you knew. You sat at my dinner table, in my home, knowing what they were doing, and said nothing. What would it have done? Margot asked. It would only have caused pain. It would have given me the truth, Wes countered. It would have allowed me to make informed decisions about my marriage, my finances, my life. Frank leaned forward. Son, we made a mistake. We admit that. But tearing the family apart like this, ruining Silas's business, cutting Aubrey off without a penny, it's extreme. Can't we find a way to move forward together? Together? Wes laughed bitterly. There is no together anymore. You chose sides the moment you decided to protect Silas instead of warning me. We didn't choose sides, Margot insisted. You did. Wes fixed her with a hard stare. You always have. Silas gets into trouble, you bail him out. Silas fails, you make excuses. Silas betrays his own brother, and you support him. That's not fair, Wesley. Frank's voice took on a defensive edge. We love you both. No, you don't, Wes replied quietly. You tolerate me because I'm successful. You rely on me because I'm responsible. But you've never loved me the way you love him. How can you say that? Margot's voice trembled. Of course we love you. Then explain why you were smiling when Aubrey announced she was pregnant with Silas's child. Wes challenged. Explain why your first instinct was to support their plan to take my house. Explain why, in every conflict between Silas and me, you've taken his side. His parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. We always knew you'd be fine, Wesley, Margot finally said, her voice soft but with an undercurrent of defensiveness. You're smart, capable, strong. Silas needed help more. The admission hit Wes like a punch to the gut, despite having suspected it for years. They'd neglected him not because they didn't believe in him, but because they did. His competence had been used against him his entire life. So I was punished for being responsible, Wes said slowly. For working hard. For not needing you. It wasn't punishment, Frank protested. We're proud of you, son. Save it. Wes stood up. I didn't come here for a debate. I came to tell you that I'm cutting you off. Financially, emotionally, completely. Margot's face paled. What do you mean? The monthly stipend I've been sending? It stops today. The health insurance I've been paying for? Canceled. The property taxes on this house? Your responsibility now. You can't do that, Frank sputtered. We're retired. We depend on that money. Then help him now, Wes replied, echoing the words from his fantasy of this confrontation. Ask Silas to support you. He's your favorite, after all. Be reasonable, Wesley, Margot pleaded. Your father's pension isn't enough to cover our expenses. We'll lose the house. Not my problem. Wes headed for the door. You made your choice. Live with it. Frank followed him. Now wait just a minute. You can't just walk away from your family. Wes turned to face him. Watch me. After everything we've done for you. Frank's face reddened with anger. We raised you. We put you through college. I paid for my own education, Wes reminded him. Full scholarship, remember? You paid for Silas's tuition, which he wasted. You paid for Silas's first business, which failed. You've been bailing him out his entire life, while I've been supporting you since retirement. This is about money, then? Margot asked, tears in her eyes. You're punishing us financially because your feelings are hurt. No, Mom, Wes said quietly. This is about loyalty. This is about trust. This is about family, all of which you betrayed. He opened the front door. Goodbye. Wesley, please. Margot called after him. We can fix this. But Wes was already walking to his car, their pleas fading behind him. As he drove away, he glanced in the rearview mirror. His father stood on the porch, arm around his mother, both watching him leave. For a brief moment, doubt crept in. Was he going too far? Was destroying his entire family worth it? Then he remembered the look on Silas's face as Aubrey announced her pregnancy. The smug satisfaction. The expectation that Wes would simply accept defeat and walk away. They had made their choices. Now they would face the consequences. 3 months later, Wes received a call from his attorney. The divorce is final, Richard announced. All terms upheld exactly as outlined in the prenuptial agreement. Aubrey walks away with nothing except her personal effects. Any pushback from her lawyer? Wes asked. They tried to challenge the infidelity clause, but our evidence was irrefutable. The financial fraud investigation sealed it. She's lucky we didn't pursue criminal charges. And Silas, his business is officially bankrupt. The bank seized what assets remained after the investigation. The loan is still outstanding, and they're coming after him personally as the guarantor. Wes nodded, even though Richard couldn't see him. Good. There's one more thing, Richard added. I heard through the grapevine that your parents' house is in foreclosure. Apparently, they missed several mortgage payments. Not my concern, Wes replied, though a small pang of something flitted through his chest. Not regret, exactly. Maybe acknowledgement of an era's end. Just thought you should know, Richard said. Congratulations on finalizing the divorce. Want to grab a drink to celebrate? Thanks, but no. I've got work to do. After hanging up, Wes walked to his window and looked out at the city below. In just 3 months, his entire family had crumbled. Silas's business gone. Aubrey left with nothing. His parents about to lose their home that he had done what he set out to do. Justice had been served. Yet instead of satisfaction, Wes felt hollow. Not because he regretted his actions, they had earned every consequence he'd brought down upon them, but because the family he'd once had, imperfect as it was gone forever. Wes poured himself a glass of whiskey and raised it in a solitary toast. To karma, he said to the empty room, swift and merciless. But the victory tasted bittersweet. 9 months passed. Winter gave way to spring, and spring to summer. Wes threw himself into his work, taking on larger projects and expanding Heartland Construction's reach beyond their small Texas town. The company had just landed a major contract to build a new office complex in Austin, a project that would keep them busy for the next 18 months and significantly boost their profits. Then on a sweltering July morning, Wes sat in his office reviewing the final architectural plans when his phone rang. Mike Donovan's name flashed on the screen. "Mike," Wes answered. "What's up? Thought you'd want to know," Mike said without preamble. "Aubrey had the baby last night. A boy." Wes paused, a strange mix of emotions swirling inside him. Not regret or longing, but something more complex, a sense of closure, perhaps. "Thanks for letting me know," he replied evenly. "There's more," Mike continued. "Silas is telling everyone who'll listen that he's getting a paternity test today. Says he wants official proof that it's his kid, so you can't deny it." Wes snorted. "He's still trying to claim some kind of victory? Seems that way. He's been strutting around town like he won the lottery, talking about how he's going to be a better father than anyone expected." Mike paused. "He's still drinking too much, though. Nearly got into a fight at Murphy's bar last weekend." "Not surprising," Wes said. "Let me know if you hear anything about the test results. For curiosity's sake." "Will do. How are you holding up?" "I'm good. Busy. The Austin project is taking shape." "Glad to hear it. Some of us are getting together at Wilson's Grill tonight, if you want to join." Wes considered it. He'd been isolating himself for months, focused solely on work and his revenge plan. Maybe it was time to step back into the world. "What time?" 8 o'clock. "I'll be there." That evening, Wes walked into Wilson's Grill, the familiar smell of burgers and beer greeting him. He spotted Mike and a few other friends at a corner table and made his way over. "Look who decided to rejoin society." Mike grinned, sliding a beer across the table toward him. Wes accepted it with a nod. "Figure it was time." The conversation flowed easily: local gossip, sports, politics, normal life topics that had nothing to do with betrayal or revenge. It felt good, Wes realized, to be part of the world again, until Derek Wilson, the restaurant owner's son, approached their table with a strange expression. "Wes," he said, glancing toward the bar. "Thought you should know your brother just showed up. He's not in good shape." Wes turned. Silas sat hunched at the bar, hair unkempt, clothes wrinkled, staring into a glass of whiskey. He looked like he'd aged years and months. "How long has he been here?" Wes asked. "About an hour," Derek replied. "He's on his 4th drink." I was about to cut him off. Mike leaned in. "Want to leave out the back?" "No," Wes said firmly. "I'm not hiding from him." As if sensing their attention, Silas looked up. His eyes, bloodshot and unfocused, landed on Wes. For a moment, he just stared. Then, to everyone's surprise, he laughed, a harsh, broken sound that drew stares from nearby tables. "Problem?" Mike asked, tensing. Before Wes could respond, Silas was on his feet, weaving his way toward their table. Well, Silas slurred, gripping the back of an empty chair for balance. "Look who it is. The perfect brother." Wes remained seated, his expression neutral. "You're drunk, Silas." "Damn right I am," Silas agreed, too loudly. "Got a real good reason to be." "This isn't the place," Wes said, conscious of the stares from surrounding tables. "No." Silas laughed again. "Seems perfect to me. Lots of witnesses for what I'm about to tell you." Mike started to stand. "Maybe you should go sleep it off, Silas." "Stay out of this," Silas snapped, then turned back to Wes. "You want to know what the paternity test said, big brother? Want to know whose kid Aubrey really had?" Wes kept his face carefully blank, but inside his curiosity peaked. "I'm sure you're going to tell me regardless." "It's not mine," Silas announced, his voice cracking. "The baby's not mine." A murmur rippled through the nearby tables. Wes blinked, the only outward sign of his surprise. "What?" "You heard me," Silas swayed slightly. "It's not my kid. Doctor said there's 0 chance." "So, Silas, sit down," Wes said, gesturing to the empty chair. Despite everything, the raw pain on his brother's face was difficult to watch, Silas collapsed into the chair, the fight draining out of him. She cheated on me, Wes. Just like she cheated on you. Who's the father? Wes asked. She claims she doesn't know. Says it could be some guy she met at a bar when we had a fight last year. Silas laughed bitterly. Or maybe the personal trainer at her gym. Or her old college boyfriend she reconnected with on Facebook. Turns out, our sweet Aubrey gets around. Mike whistled softly. Man, that's rough. You know what the worst part is? Silas continued, staring at the table. I was so sure. So certain that this baby was my big win over you. Proof that she chose me. That for once in my life, I forgot something you didn't. Wes said nothing, letting his brother talk. But she played me, just like she played you. Silas looked up, his eyes swimming with unshed tears. Do you know what she said when I confronted her? She said, at least Wes could provide for me. That's all either of us was to her a meal ticket. Derek approached the table. Everything okay over here? We're fine, Wes assured him. Can you bring some coffee for my brother? Derek nodded and retreated. Why are you being nice to me? Silas asked suspiciously. You hate me. I don't hate you, Silas. I'm just done with you. Wes leaned back in his chair. So what happens now? Hell if I know. Silas rubbed his face. I can't support a kid that's not mine. Can't even support myself. My apartment's 2 months behind on rent. The bank is still coming after me for the business loan. Mom and Dad had to move into that crappy 1-bedroom in East Side. Again, how is any of that my problem? Silas glared at him. It's not. Nothing is your problem, is it? Perfect Wesley, always landing on his feet. I work for what I have, Wes corrected. I don't betray people or steal from them. Actions have consequences, Silas. You're facing yours. So what, you're happy about this? Happy that Aubrey cheated on me too? Happy that my life is ruined? Wes considered the question seriously. Not happy, no, but I do believe in justice. And this feels like justice. Derek returned with a cup of coffee, setting it in front of Silas. Drink it, Wes ordered. Sober up. Surprisingly, Silas complied, taking a sip of the hot liquid. She trapped me, Wes. Made me think the baby was mine, so I'd stick around. She tried to trap you both, Mike pointed out. Pretty cold. Where's she now? Wes asked, curiosity getting the better of him. Staying with her sister in Houston. Says she needs space to figure things out. Silas's mouth twisted bitterly. Space away from the mess she created. For a moment, the 3 men sat in silence, the weight of Aubrey's deception settling over them. I should have listened to you, Wes, Silas finally said, his voice small. Should have stayed away from her. Yes, you should have. Wes stood up. But you didn't. And here we are. Where are you going? Silas asked, panic edging his voice. Home. My part in this story is over. Wes tossed some bills on the table to cover his beer. Take care of yourself, Silas. As Wes walked away, he heard Silas call after him. So that's it? You're just walking away? Wes paused at the door. What did you expect? Forgiveness? A brotherly shoulder to cry on? You betrayed me in the worst possible way. There's no coming back from that. He left Silas at the table, coffee cooling in front of him, the remnants of the life he destroyed scattered around him like broken glass. Outside in the warm evening air, Wes took a deep breath. The revelation about the baby hadn't brought him the satisfaction he'd expected. Instead, he felt oddly empty. The revenge he'd orchestrated had played out better than he could have planned, aided by Aubrey's own additional betrayal. He wondered briefly where she was now really was and what she was thinking. Did she regret her choices? Did she understand the magnitude of what she'd done? It didn't matter. She was out of his life for good. As he drove home, Wes realized something important. The hollow feeling wasn't disappointment that his revenge wasn't sweet enough. It was recognition that revenge itself wasn't the answer. Moving forward was 2 weeks later, Wes received another unexpected call from Mike. You need to hear this, Mike said. Silas is in the hospital. What happened? Alcohol poisoning. They found him passed out in his car behind Murphy's bar last night. He'd been there for hours. Wes pinched the bridge of his nose. Is he going to be okay? Physically, yes. But the doctor said his liver function is concerning. Apparently, he's been drinking nonstop since finding out about the baby. I see. There's more, Mike continued. He lost his apartment. Landlord evicted him yesterday, while he was in the hospital. All his stuff is sitting on the curb. Wes sighed. Mike, I appreciate you keeping me informed, but I know. Not your problem. Mike paused. Just thought you should know. After hanging up, Wes sat at his desk, staring out the window. Silas's spiral was faster and more severe than he'd anticipated. Part of him, a small, vindictive part, felt satisfaction. But another part recognized the tragedy of all. The wasted potential. The broken relationships. But he couldn't get dragged back into Silas's chaos. Some bridges, once burned, should remain in ashes. 1 month later, Wes moved into a new house. Not as large as his previous home with Aubrey, but more modern, with clean lines and open spaces that suited his minimalist preferences. It was in a gated community on the north side of town, private, secure, and far removed from his old neighborhood. The purchase had been quick and straightforward. No mortgage, just a cash offer that the sellers had eagerly accepted. The Austin project's first phase completion bonus had been substantial, allowing Wes this indulgence. It was nearly midnight when his doorbell rang. Wes had been reviewing reports in his home office and wasn't expecting anyone. He checked the security camera feed on his phone and frowned at the image. Silas stood on his porch, swaying slightly, his appearance even more disheveled than at the restaurant weeks earlier. Wes hesitated. He could ignore it. Silas would eventually leave. But something, curiosity, perhaps, or a vestige of brotherly obligation, made him go to the door. He opened it, revealing Silas in all his misery. Unshaven, hair unkempt, clothes hanging loosely on his frame. He'd lost weight, and his eyes had a hollow, haunted look. How did you find this address? Wes asked, blocking the entrance. Asked around, Silas mumbled. People talk. What do you want? Silas blinked slowly, as if gathering his thoughts. Can I come in? Just for a minute. No. Wes's response was immediate and firm. Please, man. Silas's voice cracked. I have nothing left. The exact words Wes had imagined Silas saying in this scenario months ago when he'd first plotted his revenge. The reality was both satisfying and disturbing. And whose fault is that? Wes replied, the scripted response coming easily. Mine, Silas admitted, surprising Wes with his honesty. It's all my fault. I know that. Wes said nothing, waiting for whatever came next. I lost everything, Wes. My business. My home. Aubrey. Silas rubbed his face. Mom and Dad barely speak to me now that they've lost their house. Everyone blames me, and they're right. What do you expect me to do about it? I don't know. Silas swallowed hard. Help me get back on my feet? Loan me enough to get a place to stay? I've been sleeping in my car for 2 weeks. Where's your car? Wes asked, noticing it wasn't in the driveway. Repoed it yesterday. Silas's laugh was hollow. Walked 3 miles to get here. So you came to me, Wes stated flatly. The brother you betrayed. The one whose wife you slept with. Whose money you stole. And you want my help. You're the only one left who might care if I live or die, Silas whispered. That's where you're wrong, Wes replied coldly. I stopped caring the moment you betrayed me. I was wrong, Silas said, his voice breaking. So wrong. About everything. I was jealous of you my whole life, Wes. Mom and Dad always talked about how successful you were, how responsible. I wanted them to see me that way too. So you took my wife? Stole my money? That was your solution? I know it doesn't make sense. Silas wiped at his eyes. Nothing I did makes sense. I wanted what you had. The success. The respect. Aubrey. And how did that work out for you? Silas's shoulders slumped. I destroyed everything. Including you. I'm sorry, Wes. I know it's too late, but I'm so damn sorry. For a brief moment, Wes felt the pull of shared history of the little brother who'd once followed him everywhere, who'd looked up to him before resentment took root. But the memory of betrayal was stronger. You're right, Wes said. It is too late. Silas nodded slowly, as if he'd expected this response. Then his legs gave out, and he collapsed onto the porch, sobbing harsh, broken sounds that echoed in the quiet neighborhood. Please, he gasped between sobs. I can't. I don't know what to do anymore. Wes stood in the doorway, unmoved by the display. The neighbor across the street had come onto their porch, watching the scene with undisguised curiosity. Get up, Silas. You're making a scene. But Silas couldn't or wouldn't move, his body shaking with each sob. Wes glanced at his watch. I'm going to call you a cab. It will take you to a motel. I'll pay for 3 nights. After that, you're on your own. I don't want your charity, Silas managed between sobs. I want my brother back. That's not possible. You killed that relationship the moment you betrayed me. Wes reached for the porch light switch. Goodbye, Silas. He shut the door and turned off the light, leaving Silas in darkness. Through the security camera feed on his phone, Wes watched as his brother continued to sob on the porch for several minutes before finally dragging himself to his feet and stumbling away into the night. Wes had called a cab, as promised. He gave the driver instructions to take Silas to the Red Roof Inn on the highway and provided his credit card for a 3-night stay. It wasn't forgiveness, it was the bare minimum of human decency, and perhaps a final severance payment to close this chapter for good. Whether Silas accepted the ride or not, Wes didn't know. He deleted the security footage, turned off his phone, and went to bed. Some problems weren't his to solve anymore. 1 year later, life had taken on a new rhythm for Wes. The Austin office complex project had been completed ahead of schedule and under budget, earning Heartland Construction a reputation for excellence that brought in more high-profile clients. Wes had been promoted to executive vice president, with talk of a partnership offer in the near future. His new home had become a real sanctuary, tastefully furnished, organized, peaceful. No echoes of betrayal or painful memories lurked in these rooms. Everything was new, chosen specifically by Wes for Wes. The doorbell rang promptly at 7. Wes opened it to find Elena Miller smiling up at him, a bottle of wine in hand. Right on time, he said, stepping aside to let her in. Always, she replied with a warm smile. I brought that Cabernet you liked last time. Elena had come into his life 6 months ago through a business connection, the lead architect on new project. Their professional relationship had gradually evolved into friendship, and then something more. Unlike Aubrey, Elena was genuine, straightforward, honest. There were no games, no hidden agendas. Dinner's almost ready, Wes said, taking the wine. Just needs another 10 minutes in the oven. Perfect. Give me time to tell you about the design issue we solved today. Elena followed him to the kitchen, talking animatedly about a structural challenge they'd overcome on their latest project. Wes listened, appreciating not just her professional insight, but her passion for her work. She wasn't with him for what he could provide. She had her own successful career, her own home, her own life. She was with him because she chose to be, not because she needed something from him. As they sat down to dinner, Elena paused. Oh, I almost forgot to tell you. I ran into Mike Donovan today at the coffee shop. He mentioned something about your brother being back in town. Wes's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Is he? That's what Mike said. Apparently, your brother has been in some rehab facility in Dallas for the past 9 months. Wes nodded slowly. Good for him. Mike also mentioned your ex-wife. Said she's struggling as a single mom, working at some diner in Houston. Elena, Wes said gently, I appreciate you passing along the information, but that chapter of my life is closed. She studied him for a moment. Does it bother you to talk about them? No, Wes replied, and found that it was true. They just aren't relevant to my life anymore. Elena reached across the table to touch his hand. I understand. I just didn't want you to be caught off guard if you ran into either of them. I doubt that will happen. But if it does, I'll handle it. Wes squeezed her hand. Now, tell me more about that structural solution you came up with. The conversation moved on to more pleasant topics. After dinner, they settled in the living room with glasses of wine, discussing future projects and potential vacation destinations. This was what life should be, Wes thought. Calm, purposeful, shared with someone trustworthy. The next morning, Wes met Mike for their regular Saturday golf game. Elena mentioned you've seen Silas, Wes said as they walked to the first tee. Mike nodded. Ran into him at the grocery store yesterday. Almost didn't recognize him. He looks better. Sober, at least. Where's he staying? With some friend from rehab, I think. Said he's been clean for 8 months. Wes lined up his shot. Good for him. He asked about you. Mike added cautiously. Wanted to know how you were doing. What did you tell him? The truth. That you're doing great. Got the promotion, new house, dating Elena. Mike watched as Wes drove the ball straight down the fairway. He seemed genuinely happy for you. Wes raised an eyebrow. Did he? Yeah, actually. Said something about how you deserved good things after what he put you through. Wes considered this as they walked down the fairway. And my parents? Any word on them? They're still in that apartment complex on the east side. Your dad got a part-time job as a security guard at the mall. Not much, but it helps. You ever think about reaching out to them? Mike asked carefully. No, Wes replied without hesitation. That bridge is burned. Fair enough. As they continued their game, Wes found his mind drifting to the trajectory his life had taken since the betrayal. The pain had been intense, the anger all-consuming for months. But now, looking back, he could see how that crucible had forged a stronger version of himself. One who trusted his instincts, who valued honesty above all else, who no longer wasted time on those who didn't deserve it. Later that afternoon, Wes drove to the office to catch up on some paperwork. As he pulled into the parking lot, he noticed a familiar figure sitting on a bench near the entrance. Silas. Wes considered driving away, avoiding the confrontation entirely. But that would be cowardice, and Wes Callahan was not a coward, that he parked and approached his brother, who stood as he drew near. Wes, Silas said, his voice steady. Thanks for not driving off. What are you doing here, Silas? Up close, the changes were more apparent. Silas had gained back some weight. His eyes were clear, his hands steady. The haunted look had been replaced by something else, resignation, perhaps, or acceptance. I'm not here to ask for anything, Silas began. I wanted to see you before I leave town. You're leaving? Silas nodded. Got a job offer in Arizona. Fresh start. I see. Wes shifted his weight, uncomfortable with the unexpected encounter, but unwilling to show it. Good luck with that. I won't keep you, Silas said quickly. I just wanted to say something to your face, not through Mike or a letter. Wes waited, expressionless. I'm sorry, Silas said simply. I know those words don't fix anything. I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't expect you to, but I wanted you to hear it directly from me. I was wrong. About everything. And I'm sorry for the pain I caused you. Wes studied his brother's face, searching for deception or manipulation. He found none. Is that all? He asked. Pretty much, Silas replied with a sad smile. I also wanted to tell you that I'm glad things worked out for you. Mike says you're doing well. New girlfriend. Big promotion. I am. Good. You deserve it. Silas extended his hand. Goodbye, Wes. Wes looked at the offer hand. He didn't take it. Goodbye, Silas. Silas nodded, dropping his hand. He seemed to have expected the rejection. Without another word, he turned and walked away, his shoulders straight, his pace steady. Wes watched him go, feeling neither satisfaction nor regret. Just closure. That evening, Wes sat on his back patio, a glass of whiskey in hand, watching the sun set over his immaculate lawn. His phone buzzed with a text from Elena, confirming their plans for Sunday brunch. He replied with a simple, looking forward to it, and set the phone aside. The quiet of the evening enveloped him, a peaceful contrast to the chaos of the past 18 months. He thought about where everyone had landed. Silas, sober, but starting over from nothing in a new state. No family, no business, no roots. Just the consequences of his choices to keep him company. His parents, living in a small apartment, struggling to make ends meet on Social Security, and his father's meager part-time income. Their golden years tarnished by their own terrible judgment. Aubrey, a single mother working as a waitress in Houston, raising a child who would grow up not knowing who his father was. Her dreams of financial security and easy living shattered beyond repair. And Wes. He had emerged from the flames not just intact, but stronger. His career was thriving. His new relationship was built on honesty and mutual respect. His life was peaceful, organized, successful, that he had lost a family but gained clarity. The price had been high, but the outcome was worth it. Wes raised his glass of whiskey, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth as he surveyed his domain. Justice tastes good, he said to the setting sun, and drank deeply.